Wait, okay, that's better. I had to put something underneath this. All right.
Friends, thank you for joining us. And we are back with our good friend, Marcia Montenegro. And we are been doing some pretty good stuff these last several months on our summer Ratio Christi kind of vlog series, and went over numerous topics on God's existence. Even had a debate with the Roman Catholic and one of my Protestant friends on Sola Scriptura. So we covered a lot of area. I'll just say, if you go to Ratio Christi, Winthrop University on YouTube, you can see a lot of the talks and videos and everything that we're doing. This month, being October, we wanted to do a series on, well, mainly the occult, Wicca, channeling, psychics, etc. And then the last show of the month, we'll have Shannon Guthrie on to do a talk on demonology. So last week, if you missed us, you can go to Theology Matters with the Blues on Facebook if you want to catch that. Or Marcia, what's your Facebook page?
Oh, Christian Answers for the New Age.
Wow.
There's the name of my ministry page, and I'm posting all these videos there.
Right, so you can catch it there as well. So we ran out of time last week because I had some bad planning. I had to leave and get my little girl earlier from school. So this time we wanted to give a full hour and a half. So I'm going to quit rambling, and we got part 2 basically of Wicca, and then it kind of overlaps with the occult, so we're going to jump into that. So with that said, Marcia, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Devin. Thanks for having me on again for this series. Yes, we went over Wicca last time and discussed what that was, how it got started, some of the important people involved, some of the beliefs. We didn't quite finish up, so I wanted to bring up a few points. First of all, I should talk about the word witchcraft, because Wicca is basically kind of a modern word or a reinvention of what Gerald Gardner thought was ancient witchcraft. And a lot of people should know this, because otherwise they might get in trouble with Wiccans or witches who know it and they don't know it. And that is that there is no Hebrew word for witchcraft or for witch. And a lot of people might think, wait a minute, it's in my Bible. You know, my Bible has the word witchcraft. So how can you tell me it's not in the Hebrew? Well, the thing is that witchcraft is kind of a modern term, relatively speaking. And the reason there's no Hebrew word for witchcraft, however, the practices that the Hebrew language describes fit in the generic meaning of witchcraft. It gets a little complicated because witchcraft is also a generic term that's just used for practicing the occult. So especially in other cultures and some other countries, they use the word witchcraft, and it may mean, it could mean somebody casting spells, but it could mean somebody that's just doing something occultic like divination, you know, like fortune telling.
So really
the dead.
The issue kind of like, I guess it would remind me is when I'm talking to Jehovah's Witnesses or something, they'll sometimes say, well, the word Trinity is not in the Bible. But it's one of these issues as well as the concept there. Is that kind of what you're saying as far as this,
yes,
the practices described?
Exactly. The practices are described in the Bible, but the word witchcraft isn't there. Okay. Right, exactly. That's a good way to put it. And the other thing is that witchcraft as a religion is a very modern, it's a 20th century concept. It's not even people who maybe were called witches, you know, a few centuries ago, it wasn't seen as a religion. It was a practice. The concept of it being a religion, which comes from Wicca and modern witchcraft, is very, very recent. And so that when the Bible addresses witchcraft or the practices of witchcraft, it's not addressing a religion per se. So I just want people to understand that so they know it. Because it's just helpful to know that in case you run into somebody who knows it and you didn't know it, you know. So that's the word witchcraft. And then Another thing about it, I wanted to talk about, they do have 8 holidays that they celebrate. These are all connected to nature, to the seasons, to what goes on out in nature, because of course nature and creation in terms of the trees and the rivers and the rocks and the animals is very important in Wicca, because nature really is the model in Wicca. It's seen as the standard for everything. So what happens in nature, in a sense, is always good. What nature does is always good. Let me give you a quick example. Several years ago, I was getting emails from a 13-year-old girl who was involved in Wicca. And she actually had become involved in it through her mother, who was a Wiccan. And she was emailing me, I think because of my article on Wicca, which is on my website, and was telling me why she got into it and everything, and how wonderful nature was. And so I asked her a question. I asked her, I said, well, what if you were in the woods and a storm came up and lightning hit a tree and it fell on you,
right,
and injured you or even killed you? I said, there's bad things in nature. It's not always good. And her response was, but that would just be natural. That would be part of what happens in nature.
Wow.
So in other words, it's not really bad.
Wow.
You see, and that's how they even see things like maybe lions stalking a weaker animal, for
Right.
food. That's not really a bad thing, because that's just nature. So these things that as Christians, we see, excuse me, nature as fallen and corrupt because of man's sin. And that's alluded to in Genesis 3 and Romans 8. Well, it's more than alluded to, it's stated. I'm sorry, I tend to have a very froggy voice in the morning. Let me just take a sip of
It's okay. Normally I have
something here.
Melissa with me, helping me out, running some of the social media stuff. So don't think I'm being rude. I'm just trying to get this out so people can join
Oh
in.
no, sure, that's fine. That's fine, Devin. And so we know as Christians, nature is fallen and corrupt, and that's why we see disaster and death and decay. But for Wiccans, see, this is all natural. So anyway, so nature is the model. That's why they like to do, if they can, a lot of rituals outdoors. Sometimes some witches or Wiccans will believe in the elemental spirits, which are the spirits of things like spirits of plants or spirits of trees, spirits of air, earth, water, fire, which are very important in Wicca. And they may even summon these in rituals. So nature's a big, big deal. So their 8 holidays revolve around, really goes back to earlier paganism and honoring the changes of seasons. When it comes, winter is coming, it's getting darker, the days are shorter. So there's like mythology surrounding that too. And then of course, when we go into spring, things are coming to life. So there's a cycle of life and death. They see things in a very cyclical fashion. So it's not linear, it's cyclical. And this is also something you find in the New Age as well, the cyclical view. And so they base it on that. So for example, their festival in May, which I think is Beltane, early May, is the kind of the celebration of spring and crops, or planting crops, etc. So some of this goes back to ideas about how the earth, and maybe even into some of the beliefs in gods and older paganism, the gods are doing certain things at certain times of the year. Now Halloween comes at a time, it's a Celtic, or it's based, or not really based, but it's sort of derived on Samhain, which is spelled Samhain, but you say it's Samhain. That's a Celtic holiday, pagan Celtic holiday, that has to do with winter is coming. And supposedly the occult idea here is that the veil between the worlds is very thin at that time. So some people who really want to practice something on that day, like maybe contact with the dead or communicating with spirits or whatever, that's considered a good day for that. Now, I'm just going to insert something real quick in here. I want to say a few words about Halloween since it's coming up.
Yeah.
And also it's my birthday. So
is it really? Wow.
It's not only my birthday, it's my son's birthday.
Oh my goodness.
It was born 2 weeks early on my birthday. It was my birthday surprise.
Wow.
So now Halloween, as we see it here in the United States, which is the main country that observes it, it's not really observed as far as I know any other place, is mainly a commercial holiday. It's commercial. The candy companies love it. You know, the companies that make costumes love it. And the film industry that makes scary movies loves it. So it's very much a commercial holiday. Some of the practices that people hear about, like carving the pumpkins and bobbing for apples, there are stories that they are based on certain things. But the problem is, in almost all of those cases, there is no evidence for that. You know, I had read that bobbing for apples used to be a practice of divination. As far as I know, there's no real historical evidence. So
Okay.
you get this stuff and it spreads on the internet and people take it as true. And yet, you know, what I want to say is let's see historical solid evidence for these things. Now, some of this stuff was brought over by the Irish immigrants to the United States. And they brought over some of these kind of folk practices. So some of it is probably based on superstition. And superstition is often connected to the occult. But there's no trick-or-treating for candy, really, in my opinion, is not an occult activity. Children are not practicing the occult when they go trick-or-treating.
They're not worshiping the devil. And
They're not, yes. You know, I really, and I have to, and I'll admit, I have changed, because when I first became a Christian, I believed all that stuff about Halloween. And I just thought, you know, I'm not going to have anything to do with it. I'm not going to open my door. I'm not going to give out candy. I'm not, you know, etc. So over the time, though, as I investigated it more, I've come to see it more as an issue of conscience. And if Christians are bothered by it and don't want to participate, I think that should be honored.
Right.
And if Christians are not bothered by it, then that should be honored. We shouldn't fight over it or accuse each other. We need to let other believers act according to their conscience. I do believe this is a true meat for idols issue. And because a lot of times what I talk about is not a meat for idols issue, but people tell me it is. And so I'm usually constantly refuting and explaining why something is not a meat for idols issue, but I do believe this is. Now, the one thing I would say is I don't think it's a good idea to have your children dressed up in as a ghost or a witch.
Right. That's what I was going to ask, because it seems like, you know, I'll date myself here, but like the Buffy the Vampire Slayer and all these kind of shows were real targeted at kids. And so it was almost like, you know, it's no problem if kids are dressing up as, I don't know, characters in, I forget the real famous books. But, you know, where they're basically wizards and witches and these kind of things.
Yeah. I don't think we should, as Christians, we should not glorify something that has an evil or really scary or morbid kind of thing, you know, like a vampire with blood running down their lips or something. Yeah. You know, that's just, you know, I'm not going to say it's the worst thing you can do, but I think as a Christian, we just don't want to glorify that.
What about like the Harry Potter stuff? That's what I was thinking of. I know that is.
Harry Potter is another story. Okay. I have articles on the books and the movies on my website at christiananswersforthenewage.org. And I read all of them, of course. And my issue with Harry Potter is that it does affirm occult practices. And not only does it affirm occult practices, it actually has real occult concepts in there. For example, And now we're over into the the cult topic, but that's okay because I only have one more thing to say about the Wicca, but I'll go ahead with this. One of the occult things I noticed in the book, and I wasn't expecting this, is, and I think it's the fourth book, where Harry learns to summon his Patronus. And the Patronus is kind of a guardian spirit. And so he's told he kind of has to go through several steps to do it. It's like not easy for him at first.
Right.
And a lot of what is said about this reminded me of two things. It reminded me of something that's called in the occult and the New Age a thought form. And it also reminded me of spirit animals. But both of those exist in both the occult and the New Age. And so a thought form is, and I believe this may come from occultic, I think actually it goes back to indigenous practices that were absorbed in Tibetan Buddhism and maybe Hinduism, but it goes back, it's really prior to those religions and goes back to this indigenous animistic belief. And the idea is that you can conjure up a sort of a creature that's not really part of the real world, but that is real and has an independent identity, an identity independent of you, but it comes from you. You can kind of create it with your mind.
Wow.
And I remember reading about this when I was in the New Age, and I'm reading about people who talked about creating these thought forms. And that's what it reminded me of. And it also made me think of animals, spirit guides, because in the New Age and the occult, there's an idea that, especially I would say in the occult and in Wicca and witchcraft, you can have an animal who is a spirit guide, is your guide, and it could be, it could be anything. It could be an owl, it could be, a leopard, it could be a lion or wolf or whatever, and you actually may have communication with a spirit guide. Animal spirit guide. Now, what's really disturbing is a few years ago, I discovered that there were some teachings online and in some books for children on like who is your animal spirit? Who's your animal? Who's your guardian animal? And this is just taken straight from the occult. And they were telling children about it, and there are actually some cartoons, children cartoon series where they have this concept. A lot of the stuff is in children's entertainment. And I think because adults see it and it's a cartoon and it's for children, they assume it's innocent. They think, oh, this is just imagination, and they don't understand that this is really an occult practice and an occult concept. And of course, then I know people listening might be thinking, well, Marcia, do you really believe that there are these animals who are guardian spirits? Well, no, I don't believe the guardian spirits are animals. I think they're fallen angels. And I think if you do this, you actually may get in contact with a fallen angel who will appear or seem to be an animal. So it's the same thing as when you have spirit guides, which I had spirit guides. In my experience, and for most New Agers, are not animals; they're people. There's some kind of spiritual master, wow. And they're not animals. But you can go the animal route. So that's what the conjuring of the Patronus reminded me of, and I found extremely evil. And there's other parts, there's many other things in the books where there are occult concepts. And even towards the end, you have Harry communicating with the dead. So, it's very disturbing to me that so many Christians defended these books. And a lot of Christians even saying Harry Potter was presenting Christian concepts. I don't see a single Christian, I see some moral values.
Yeah.
In the books that you could say are compatible with Christian concepts, but no, I don't see them as telling a Christian story or anything. And how people do this is they read a meaning into the Harry Potter books, and they aren't taking the context into consideration, and they are not familiar with the occult.
So it wouldn't be similar, because I've heard the kind of the counter as well. C.S. Lewis wrote certain fiction books, and so why is it okay for Lewis but not Rowling? And
That's true. A lot of people ask that question. As far as C.S. Lewis goes, I only read a few. I read The Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe when I was a teenager, before I was a Christian. And I read his series Paralandra, which is not what people are usually referring to when they bring up C.S. Lewis.
Right.
But my understanding, since I haven't read all the books, my understanding is that he does not present the occult in a positive fashion.
Okay.
That's my understanding from
Right.
people
I've never
who have read him.
either, so.
Yeah.
I've read
Huh?
I've read Lewis's, more of his theological stuff, not
Right.
his fiction
Right.
stuff. So.
Right. So, I mean, that's my understanding. He was not presenting it as positive. And of course, when he was writing, Wicca wasn't around.
Right.
And there weren't a lot of people running around saying they were witches. This is something that's become more of a something that we see since he died. So for him, it was probably very imaginary, or even kind of like a fairy tale kind of thing.
Right.
But as far as I know, and what I've said is, if he did in any way present something from the occult as positive, it was probably accidental. And I still don't agree with it. Okay, so let's say such and such a character did this, and that's an occultic thing, and he presented it as a good thing. Okay, well, I'm sorry, I don't think that's good. But even if that happens, I think it's, compared to Harry Potter, it's so minimal.
Right.
And I'm asked about Tolkien a lot. Now, I did go through the Hobbit book and the 3 books that Tolkien wrote, that they turned into movies.
Okay.
And I did that because the movies were coming out on it, and because of the popularity of Harry Potter, and everybody was asking me about Tolkien. And so I thought, okay, I guess I got to read the books. I think it took me 2 years to get through those books.
Wow.
Because of course I was taking seminary courses too, and doing my ministry full time. So,
right.
I had to do reading for my courses and other reading, but I managed to get through them. It was very hard for me because I'm not a fan of fantasy fiction at all. It's not my kind of reading. So it's very hard for me to read them. And some of the chapters, some of the scenes he has are very, very long, and for me, very tedious. Oh my goodness. Believe me, Devin, I suffered.
I'm not a fan of fiction. I don't watch fiction on TV. I don't read, like, all my books. It's all like apologetics, philosophy, scientific apology. I cannot get into fiction. I don't know. That's just.
I can read some fiction, but I'm very, very picky, and it's not fantasy. I can read a little sci-fi. I can read just kind of drama. I like murder mysteries, like Agatha Christie and things like that.
Right.
But fantasy, no.
Yeah.
So anyway, now I read the books very carefully. There's only a couple of places that I thought that he kind of presented something occultic as good, but I'm not sure if he's aware of it. There's a scene where I think the Elf Queen looks into a bowl of water, or a fountain of water or something, and she sees something. I think she sees somebody coming, and that's a future event. It actually meant somebody was coming. And so looking into water or an opaque surface, and then getting a vision that way is an occultic practice. There's even a name for it, which I can't think of right now, but it's a form of divination.
Okay.
That, and there was maybe 1 or 2 other places, but for the most part, the message of Tolkien is that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The ring, when the people find the ring, and when Frodo has the ring and realizes it can make him invisible, and when these people hold the ring, they feel this incredible sense of power. They almost get addicted and attached to it. They don't want to get rid of it. So these rings that it talks about, which is kind of the centerpiece of what's going on in the books, are really, to me, can be seen from a Christian viewpoint as the temptation to want to be like God and have power like God. And that if people or creatures, any creatures get hold of this, it corrupts them. They think they're going to do something good with it. The idea is, oh, I'll have that power and I'm going to just use that power to make everybody happy or to give everybody food. But when they get it, they use it for themselves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
so
think that's very true to what God tells us about ourselves.
yeah, and I think that's maybe the difference with Lewis and these other guys is the story points to Christ.
Yeah.
The story is pointing to the Creator and that which is good, beautiful, and true, not how you can have these powers and practices and etc.
Exactly.
It's pointing to a fallen world and pointing to Christ. Maybe that's the difference.
Yeah, there's a big difference, and there's a difference in the idea of moral absolutes in Tolkien, and I assume probably in C.S. Lewis. That is not in Harry Potter.
Oh, really?
I find the Harry Potter stories very amoral.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I
I've
don't
never read
see
the
moral
series,
absolutes.
so.
And yeah, and another thing is that in Harry Potter, the power that Harry can draw on to do his stuff, his magic, and what Voldemort, the villain, draws on come from the same place. And see, this is an occult concept and also a concept in Wicca and witchcraft, that there is a source of power and that power is neutral. So you can draw on it and you can use it for good or bad.
Wow.
And that's a major worldview in the occult and in Wicca and witchcraft. And that is in Harry Potter.
And that's such a distinction as to where the good would be from the Creator.
Right.
Not this, anybody, if you can do the magical thing right, then you can harness the power. It sounds way different.
Yeah, it's very different. It's in Star Wars too, that the power is from the same place. Now, Star Wars is another story because we get into the really Taoism, yin and yang, and the power, the chi. If I have time when I'm talking about the occult, I may bring that in. But so those to me are the problems with Harry Potter and as compared to Tolkien.
Okay. Sorry to bring that in. I know that's
no, actually it's good.
A lot of people have questions about that,
No, actually that was good because I think it helped. I think it helped show what the occult concepts are and how you can recognize them. Look for that idea. Is the power for good and evil coming from the same place? That's something to look for in books that have these kind of themes. And the last thing I'm going to say about Wicca, and then I'll jump right in more into the occult, is that I wanted to talk about their symbols. Of course, the one everyone is familiar with is the pentagram, the 5-pointed star. The point is point. There's 1 point up and 2 points down. And each of these points stands for something: earth, air, water, fire. And then the top point that's pointing up usually it can stand for goddess. Okay, it can stand for goddess. Or it's different. It's not always the same thing. But they see this as a symbol, of course, of their, connection to the earth and to nature: air, earth, water, fire. And so they will use that sometimes in their rituals. Now, I also wanted to say, it's a pentagram is nothing more than a geometric figure. It's not evil in and of itself. It's just a geometric figure. And geometry and shapes all come from God because God created everything. So, God created a shape, and created straight lines and curvy lines because, we see that in our world. And so it's not like the pentagram itself, the figure is evil. What matters in a symbol is what it represents and how it's used and if it's recognized in the culture. So for example, I have read that the pentagram centuries ago at one time stood for the 5 wounds of Christ from the cross.
Wow.
You actually can find it carved on some churches. This is going back to maybe the 11th, 12th, 13th centuries.
Wow.
And so the pentagram really depends on who's using it and what meaning they're giving to it.
Okay.
Now, right now, it's being used mainly by people in Wicca and witchcraft. So I wouldn't wear a pentagram because it would give people the wrong idea of what I believed.
Right.
Now, when you turn it upside down, you have the 2 points up and the 1 point down. In that case, that is how some Satanists use it. And so I do want to say something here about Satanism. I classify Satanism really as sort of a category unto itself. Generally speaking, it would fall under the occult, but it's such a different kind of thing from even Wicca and witchcraft and the occult. It's very different. Witches don't believe in Satan. In fact, there's a lot of animosity between witches and Satanists. Witches
Really?
don't like the fact that Satanists use the pentagram, and they say the Satanists stole it from us. And the Satanists don't like witches because they think the witches are weak and they try to be good. They think being good is a good thing. And Satanists don't believe, they're very amoral. They don't believe that you have to hold to moral absolutes. They think they can make their own morals. They're very independent and have an idea that they don't need to follow anyone's moral code. You know, that's sort of a characteristic of Satanism. So here, most witches would say, well, I use my powers for good. You know, I want to use my powers for healing or doing spells to help people or something like that, or because I'm close to nature. And so the Satanists just poo-poo all that. You know, they think that's weak. You know, if you're that kind of person who wants to be good, and they include Christians in that too. So in a way, they see Christians and witches as the same thing.
Wow.
There's a term called white lighters, and for a Satanist, that's a disparaging term. You know, you're a white lighter. You know, you care about trying to be good. You're trying to follow someone's moral code. So it's very interesting. There's just a lot of animosity between them. Now, you know, Satanists can do practices of witchcraft, and there are witches. I mean, it can overlap. There are people who might be into witchcraft, but also get into Satanism and kind of combine the two. So
Okay.
there can be crossover, but generally speaking, they are two distinct movements.
Would you say then that Satanists believe in like the supernatural, or are they naturalists, or?
I think there's such a variety. There's a lot of Satanists. Most modern Satanism, from what I can find out, is atheistic. They don't believe in God or Satan, but Satan is a symbol for them of individual power.
Right.
And
So they wouldn't agree with Wiccans then, as far as like spells or being able to have spirit interactions.
generally speaking, no. Generally, there might be some who do that. There's certain Satanists who might be into doing spells and magic and sorcery.
Right.
Generally speaking, though, the modern Satanist movement that is mostly coming from Anton LaVey. Anton LaVey, if people out there who don't know who he is, he was this very colorful character, to say the least. He was very dramatic, and he was a showman. You know, he was almost like an exhibitionist. He was out there, and he liked to create controversy and stuff. He liked attention from the media. He started the Church of Satan in 1966 in San Francisco, and he ended up actually getting a lot of celebrities involved. A lot of celebrities would go to his meetings or whatever. And one of them was an actress. And her name has just gone out of my head. She was a blonde bombshell, kind of like Marilyn Monroe, but she was, I can't think of her name. I hope it comes to me. She was supposedly a part of his Church of Satan. And he would do things like to get attention from the media. So a lot of people think he was just a showman and he wasn't serious about it, and he just did this to get attention. But there are teachings. There is something called the Satanic Bible that comes from Anton LaVey. I have a copy of it. I've read through it. What he does is he takes like what we would call the Ten Commandments, and he says, these are the 10 rules or something. And they include things like, don't ever be nice to anybody who's mean to you. You know, it's kind of like the opposite of what a Christian, what Jesus said, you know, don't return evil for evil. So
Right.
he's like, yeah, return evil for evil, you know? So it's kind of like the backwards ideas of what a Christian would say and other things that he has in there. And he does have rituals, but it's like he writes about them mostly as though he doesn't really believe them, but it's hard to tell. So I think Satanism is it's not a one basket thing. You can't say, here is what all Satanists believe. Here are the tenets of Satanism. You can look up the Church of Satan and see what, you know, their website says. But then there's a lot of people into Satanism who are not affiliated with the Church of Satan. And there was a Temple of Set. I'm not sure if the Temple of Set is still active. The Temple of Set was started by a man who was at one time in the Church of Satan with Anton LaVey, and had a argument or very big disagreement with him, and he broke away and he formed his own religion, the Temple of Set. And Set is an Egyptian god. I think it's the Egyptian god of death. And he taught that Set was actually Satan. So that's why it's called the Temple of Set. And he set the Temple of Set up as a very occult organization. It had levels. So you know, you would enter at a certain level and you would have to do certain things and get to the next level and then get to the next level. And there was all this secrecy, you know, they were very secretive about what they did. And I think they were much more into occult practices than the Church of Satan.
Okay.
So they're kind of like a different breed of Satanism. And then you have individuals out there who kind of make up their own satanic religion. And then you have troubled youngsters, troubled young people who are rebellious and do things to shock people or something. They think, yeah, you know, we can get power from Satan. Let's go into the woods and we'll kill an animal and, you know, we'll carve 666 on the trees or something, you know, we'll conjure up Satan. And they do these kind of goofy, crazy things in a very disorganized fashion. And the people who do these things are often the people we hear about in the newspapers. And so people think this is Satanism, and it's actually not. It's kind of like it's being done by wannabe, immature, you know, teenagers who think they're being Satanists. Because actual real Satanists, the adult Satanists who are very sober and serious about their beliefs, are very secretive. They don't like try to get attention or go out in the woods and do these crazy things. Now, I have to address this because I know there's something called the Temple of Satan that started several years ago. And they are trying to bring lawsuits against, what they're trying to do is basically attack any public display of religions, especially Christianity. So, you know, if there's some kind of religious statue at a courthouse or something, they'll challenge it. They seem to be very politically motivated. I think some of the people involved in it are Satanists, but they also have atheists and other people. And what's different about them is that their values include the idea of doing good things. And that's not part of Satanism. So I don't really classify them as Satanism.
Okay.
I classify them more as some kind of politically mixed group of different pagan type non-Christian views and atheism. Okay, so I think I kind of finished with that. I don't know what I just did, but I was touching on Satanism, which oddly enough, actually, I had not even thought to bring up. But it really should be brought up because a lot of people have questions about it and don't know how to classify it, or they think witches and Satanists are the same thing. And, you know, they're not. They're have very different worldviews.
Yeah.
And the occult, I want to kind of jump in here and kind of with my basic introduction to it, which is it's based on Deuteronomy 18, 10 and 11. And this is where God lists all the practices of the occult. So everything's listed there, like casting spells, contacting the dead, spirit contact, enchantment, reading omens, divination, sorcery. Now, different Bibles will use different words because the different translations will take the Hebrew terms and translate them slightly different. And this can be confusing because if you read those verses in King James and then you read them in the ESV or you read them in the New Living Translation, or in NIV, they're not all going to be the same. And they're going to, in some cases, they'll seem to differ vastly. And that's because the translators are putting the words into modern terms that relate to modern practices. So I think the King James may use the word augury, A-U-G-U-R-Y. I mean, who uses that word? Nobody. Nobody goes around and says, I think he's doing augury. But I think that's in the King James. And that has to do with like foretelling things by looking at certain signs. I would classify it as reading omens. So, if I see a falling star, then that means something, it's kind of like an omen. Or I see a crow flew across your house, so someone in your family is going to die. This is like reading omens, which God forbids. It's listed there. Right. So the three main areas are divination, spirit contact, and sorcery. And you can classify all of those things under one of those three categories. Some practices will fit two categories. So divination is normally interpreted, or normally the way most people use that word is fortune telling. I really like the word divination better because fortune telling sounds like you're always talking about the future, but divination is really more than that. So divination is reading hidden meanings in the natural world or in pictures or shapes or numbers. So reading things in the natural world would be like astrology, reading a hidden meaning, because the astrologer believes, and I used to be an astrologer, the astrologer believes that, if Venus means something in your chart, the moon means something. When the sun is in Capricorn, that means something. So in other words, all of this has a meaning, but do you see that meaning? Is it obvious? I mean, when you think of the planet Venus, Devin, do you think of that it means relationships? No, I'm sure you don't. I mean, you don't go around thinking, I wonder where Venus is in my chart today, or where's, like I need to see, because I need to see how to deal with my marriage today. I mean, you don't give a meaning to the fact that, or maybe, I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but let's say the planet Mars is getting near the planet Saturn. Let's just say that. That doesn't mean anything to you, right? I mean, it's like, okay, so Mars is near Saturn, that may be interesting astronomically.
Yeah.
Astrology and astronomy are different. Astronomy is scientific study. Astrology gives meaning to all of these things. So you're reading a meaning into nature, or palm reading is reading a meaning like in the lines of your hand. Geomancy is reading a meaning into shapes and figures, and that is used in feng shui. So that's a big part of feng shui. And reading a meaning in numbers is numerology. Reading a meaning in pictures or images is tarot cards. People use tarot cards and they interpret the pictures on the cards as having a meaning. So, but you're reading, all of these are hidden meanings. They aren't obvious. So that is a big part of divination. The other part of divination is to get information beyond the five senses supernaturally. So that would be like what a psychic does.
Okay.
A psychic is getting the information in some way. They may believe their guide is giving it to them. They may believe they're tapping into some source of information in a supernatural way. that will allow them to talk to you about yourself and what your problems are. So a psychic is doing divination. So that's kind of a broad picture of divination. I have an article on my website that's called Divination, and I list a lot of the practices and explain them. Even opening a book, and this is what I know some Christians do this. They're like, take the Bible, and they're like, I'm just going to open it and point, and that'll be God's message for me today. That's actually called bibliomancy, and it's a form of divination.
Wow.
So, Christians should do that. That's not how we're supposed to treat God's word. It's not like some kind of random fortune telling, like a fortune cookie. Spirit contact is kind of, I guess, self-explanatory. You're trying to contact a disembodied spirit. You may think it's the dead. You may think it's aliens. You may think it's angels. And angels would certainly qualify there. This is why it is not biblical to try to contact an angel. And nobody in the whole of Scripture, there is no single example of any person trying to contact an angel. The only communication we see is when God is sending the angels to give people a message.
What about certain sects of Christianity that say we should pray to the dead and pray to saints, etc.?
Well, that's not biblical. It's not. I think they may base that on some of the apocryphal books. I'm not sure, but I think praying for the dead may be in one of the apocryphal books, but it's definitely not in the 66 books that, like you and I, regard as God's word, the canon of Scripture. And
forbidden almost,
and
right?
It's actually forbidden. Yeah, contacting the dead is listed in that passage I referenced in Deuteronomy 18 and elsewhere. If you look through Kings, like 2 Kings, when all of the kings were beginning to do pagan practices, the kings of Judah and Israel were like really, getting into trouble there. It'll say, and he did evil in the sight of God. He was doing divination. He was practicing sorcery or whatever. You find all these practices condemned by God. So contacting the dead definitely is forbidden by God.
Right.
And then you have sorcery. Now, sorcery, I think the modern word for that would be magic, not in the sense of doing tricks, like card tricks or something, or pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Those are all tricks based on skill. Sorcery is manipulating or channeling, in some way getting a supernatural power in order to bring about a result. So you're trying to summon some kind of energy or power, whatever you think it is. You may think it's even a god or some kind of spirit or just some kind of force, and you are trying to use that to manipulate reality, to bring a change into reality. And that would be sorcery. I think it's probably the area that's the hardest to explain and to understand, but it would include healing too. Energy healing is sorcery, because you are accessing in some way, or think you're accessing an unknown force, an unknown, unquantifiable force, and then trying to use it to heal. So energy healing, like Reiki. There's something called healing touch, which is based on energy. All of that I would consider sorcery. And then kind of related to this, I'm not sure, I actually think it's kind of like sorcery basically, but because this will probably make some people unhappy for me saying this, but I'm sorry. Acupuncture. Acupuncture doesn't come from medicine. It goes way back to Chinese shamanism and animism, and this belief in this force that is in the universe and runs through our bodies, called chi or ki. This force, if it becomes blocked, it runs through invisible channels called meridians. And so the idea is that if you are ill or you have a bad pain somewhere, it's because the chi is blocked. And the needles are put in at certain locations that supposedly will unblock the chi in that area.
Wow.
And that's what the needles are for. That this has been looked at. NIH set up a committee in 1993, National Institutes of Health, to study quote unquote alternative healing. And they looked at acupuncture. A lot of tests were done over the years, and they couldn't find that it had any validity. It didn't have enough validity for them to say, yes, this could be used in a legitimate way. Some of the studies would show a little that it seemed in a very small percentage maybe to help people, but they also found that sham acupuncture also produced the same results. So it was
Like a
mainly
placebo.
the placebo effect, yeah.
Yeah.
So acupuncture to me is really an occult practice and based on an occult worldview. Now it went into the religion of Taoism, but Taoism came from Chinese shamanism. So there's a lot of kind of animistic practices like this in Taoism.
Okay.
So I personally have had people tell me who had acupuncture who had very bad experiences, like, you know, what they considered to be demonic experiences with it.
Wow.
So when people ask me about it, I tell them what it is, and I tell them I do not recommend it, you know, so.
Yep.
So a lot of alternative healing is spiritually based, and it's based on beliefs like this. It's based on energy beliefs. It's based on ideas that are not coming from the world of science or biology or anything like that. It's based on spiritual belief systems.
Right.
And I think that alternative healing has gotten into the church in a big time way. It started in the 90s. I watched it as it went through the church. And it has, what it's done is not only have people do things that are not going to really help them, but they have started accepting the worldviews behind it. Like more Christians now think that there's some kind of energy, that it's okay to use this energy, or some may even say it's from the Holy Spirit. So you have Christians like justifying this view, or they believe in vibrations. You know, this herb vibrates at a certain level that will help my body. You know, this is all pseudoscience.
Right.
It's not it's not based on actual facts and research. So anyway, that's a big area. So that is, sorcery is to me is a very wide area that can include a lot of things. And so those are the three main areas of the occult. Now the occult worldview to me is different from the New Age worldview. The New Age worldview is very future oriented. It's about evolving spiritually. You know, you're evolving usually through a series of lifetimes through reincarnation. Your goal is always like, I need to evolve. I need to learn more. I need to step up my meditation. There's this kind of idea of having to make spiritual progress.
Right.
I need to learn my lessons from karma. So karma comes from Hinduism, and the idea is that you accumulate each lifetime that you live. Of course, in Hinduism, there's reincarnation. So that means that after you die, you will come back again as a completely, another person. And so they believe that you accumulate karma because everything you do in your previous lives, you're going to have to deal with the consequences, whether they're good or bad. And so if you suffer in this lifetime from something, if you're hit by a car or someone robs you or something like that, it's probably a result of something you did in a past life. And so in this lifetime, you want to try to avoid something that will create more bad karma in the future. So that idea is big in the New Age. So here you have this idea of progress and learning from your lessons, etc. Now, the occult worldview is more, how do you access meaning and power from the world we're in now? How do I, and of course they see the world as having hidden powers and hidden meanings. So how do you access that? How do I use that for my benefit and the benefit of others now? So healing is also big in the occult.
Yeah.
Now, there's a crossover in that. Oh, I wanted to say too, the occult is more here and now oriented, not future oriented.
Okay.
But there can be crossovers where you have, for example, someone who does witchcraft has New Age views, might believe in reincarnation, might believe in karma, but she's practicing witchcraft. And in the New Age, you have New Agers who accept occult practices like astrology, tarot cards, palm reading. So I was a professional astrologer, but I was a New Ager. I did not have the occult worldview. I had a New Age worldview that mostly was based on Eastern religions. So my worldview was different from somebody who was a witch or a Wiccan.
Wow.
Unless they were incorporating a New Age worldview into their beliefs. So there's no real clear line, but to me, those are the two different worldviews. So a lot of people kind of put the New Age and the occult together as one thing, and I can kind of understand that. But one of the things I always do is I'm always making distinctions. I know this is something God somehow gave me that desire to make distinctions. So I'm very analytical, and I'm always making distinctions between things. I hate it when things are like merged together when they're actually different or something. It just drives me nuts. It's like, no, let me tell you how that's different. I mean, it can really be annoying, let me tell you. Just ask my family. It's very annoying. So, I see these distinctions. I realize, when I think about it, like, okay, here when I was an astrologer, I had a lot of friends who were Wiccans and witches, and I did their astrology charts. And, so I had a lot of conversations with them. I would go over to their homes. My chiropractor was a witch. And,
wow.
she got me a lot of clients. She would give my business card to her clients. And I had a lot of clients from her. So I hung out with them, and I heard them talk. I actually participated in a few rituals I was invited to. And I could see, my immediate, I would think about it and think, okay, now, why am I not thinking this way? Or why would I not be comfortable be a witch? Would I want to be a witch? Like, I would ask myself that. Do I want to go into witchcraft? Let me consider that, and I would think about it, and I'm like, no, I'm not. I don't accept that idea. The idea of casting spells seemed very alien to me. There was something about it that it was kind of like there was just something in me that couldn't go there. Wow. And I realized the way they saw things was not exactly how I saw things. So I was very aware of the differences in the New Age worldview and the Wiccan and occult worldview. So those are some differences. Between New Age and the occult. Yeah. And I think the occult, I think what's happened in our culture is that we have become desensitized to it.
Right. Probably because of the movies and books and everything.
Exactly. It's because of entertainment. We started having TV shows where the main characters were psychics or mediums, especially mediums. There were several shows about mediums, contact with the dead, how they help people.
I think Animal Planet or something like that has a show on that, right? Where
they do? I don't know. Animal Planet?
Yeah, and I believe it's like a horse whisperer type thing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of a psychic thing.
That's it. I remember commenting to Melissa, like, man, so there's no way how could you ever falsify, she's saying that the horse feels so and so.
I know, if you say, well, this horse, I've been with this horse, and this horse is telling me that you give him his oats at the wrong time of day. Like, yeah, how's anybody going to verify that? Everybody got to tell him he's wrong, because obviously, the horse can't say, no, that's not what I said. Yeah, now I see that as kind of, to me, I don't have a huge concern of that. My concern is when people are going to these people for advice. when they're, somebody's telling them how you give your horse oats, at another time of day, it's like, okay, I'm not too worried about that going on, but I am worried about, although I love animals, I am worried about people who get drawn to these mediums and these psychics. And next, in our part 3 next week, I know it's going to be on psychics and channeling. And,
Yeah.
and I'm going to talk, that's when I'm going to talk about it. But, like I was talking about the entertainment, you have these shows with mediums. You have Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Interestingly enough, the idea of her being a vampire slayer is very fantasy to me. It's a fantasy thing. But her best friend became a Wiccan. And this best friend became more and more prominent as the series went on, and her activities as a Wiccan, where she cast spells. I think one time had a very bad result, had to, deal with that or have Buffy help her or something. Because I watched the show on a fairly regular basis at the time, because I was following it to see what concepts it was, because it was so popular. It was, for a while there, it was like the #1 show between, I forgot, like between ages 12 and 22 or something. It was like the #1 show. So I was watching it to see what concepts were coming into the culture through this program. And they had the Wicca thing. So here's her best friend, Willow, who's this very sweet, kind of reserved, shy young lady. And she becomes Wiccan and starts investigating that. And she becomes more confident and more sure of herself. It's giving a positive spin to it.
Right.
And so that was very troubling to me. That troubled me a lot more than what Buffy did, which I saw as a fantasy thing. But they also had an occult concept in there, which I should mention. And this is a concept called, it's kind of part of polarity. And the idea is that there has to be balance between light and dark, male and female, good and bad, health and illness. There has to be this balance for the world to run smoothly. There has to be, for harmony to exist, the forces, dark and light forces, have to be balanced. And I actually, on some of the Buffy programs, they actually said this. And in fact, I think there was something happened in one program where the forces got uneven. And so Buffy had to get involved to bring everything back in balance. And this is an occult concept.
Right.
And you can see that in Star Wars with the, you have the people using the Force, but the so-called the good Jedi, who are the good people, are using the Force in a good way, and the Sith are using the Force in a bad way. But the Force is the same. And I remember one scene in one of the later movies of Star Wars where they're trying to convert Anakin to the dark side, okay? And Anakin, I remember he's with a Sith Lord or something, and the Sith guy says, the power that you use, that the Jedi use, and the power we use is the same. He said it's the same, we just go deeper with it. And that is like a very occult concept, because there's this idea, even by some in the occult, it's not so much the light side and dark side, it represent good and bad, but they just represent, the dark side just represents when you're ready, you can go deeper and you can access more power.
So the dark side's a good thing then?
It can be a good thing if you understand it and know how to use it and you're ready for it, yes. And so the Sith Lord basically was articulating that.
Wow.
And so when I heard that, I was like, wow. I can't believe I just heard him say that. So there's a lot of these concepts, Star Wars and in entertainment in general, from children's cartoons to children's movies to adult movies, books. A lot of children's series and series for young adults have occult themes. There's so many, I couldn't, there's no way anybody could keep up with them. You just couldn't. There's just so many. And people are often constantly contacting me and saying, have you heard of this series? This book series my my brother gave this to my 12-year-old son, and I was looking at it, and I think it might be, there might be something in there that's unbiblical or that's occultic. Have you heard of it? So, then I'll go online and I'll try to find out about it. And yeah, often, usually there's something there. There's, some kind of occult practice is being used, but it's presented as a positive thing.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
It really seems like they do. They target the kids, and it's always the characters are always put in a really good light, and
Yeah.
so even same with the TV characters. They're funny, they're sweet, they're the compassionate, loving ones, and so it's like, how could you ever criticize the practice? Because look how sweet and wonderful and kind and loving these people are compared to the mean Christians, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because the Christians are going to tell you this is bad and you can't do this and you can't do that. You have to follow all these rules. And we believe that you should explore for yourself.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's like, look at this character. Look how she's helping people with her powers. It's very appealing. It's very appealing.
It is. Yeah, and I think just that almost want for power compared to something like Christianity, where it's about submission to Christ rather than, you're not the one that's calling the shots and ruling and determining the future. Rather, you don't know the future, and you just have to trust in the one who does. So I could see how it's more appealing for some on that aspect as well.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think you put your finger on it there. It's in Christianity, we are learning to submit to God's will, to submit to Christ more. Like John the Baptist said, he must increase, I must decrease.
Right.
It's not about us having some kind of power or prominence, but it's also about serving. It's about submitting and serving, but from our will, not doing it as a way to appear good, or we think we're going to get some credit from God for doing it. It's because we want to, because we love the Lord, or we love Jesus, so we want to submit. Whereas in the occult and the New Age, it's more about you. It's all about you and what you can do, what you can accomplish. And so these programs and books that feature these people doing the occult practices always show them being helpful. This is the constant theme that you see. And like you said, then if you start criticizing it, you look like the bad guy. Well, what kind of mean person are you to criticize this wonderful woman who's like using her powers to help people?
Right. Well, Oprah has been a big pusher of the New Age, but also I think of like a lot of the daily talk shows, the Dr. Phil's, the Dr. Oz, these guys where they're bringing in the psychics to help. Montell Williams was real big with this. I don't know if you remember him. Yeah, he would always bring in psychics to try and solve a crime. Well, how are you going to criticize someone that's, solving crimes of the death of a little kid or something,
Right. And I do want to talk about that next week, about the solving crimes thing. But I want to say something about Montell Williams. He had a psychic, I think it was a psychic, who supposedly diagnosed an illness he didn't know he had. Wow. And he got it confirmed. And so that caused him to become, it was almost like he became a devotee of this psychic, and he believed, he just swallowed the whole thing. So he started having psychics and everything every week on his show. I mean, I remember when he had Sylvia Brown, who's a very famous medium, very famous. I mean, she died maybe, I don't know what, 4, maybe 5 years ago.
Wow.
Very famous medium who was on a lot of TV programs, wrote a lot of books. I was always dealing in my ministry a lot of times when she was very popular with Christians who had family members who were really admirers of Sylvia Brown, would read her books, thought that she was helping people, she was comforting people, and I mean, she really had a big impact on a lot of people. She really did.
Yeah.
And she had a definite worldview. I mean, I read a couple of her books, and she had a worldview of it was a very kind of strange worldview. She called herself a Gnostic.
Right. I
And
remember
she
that.
said she had explored Gnostic Christianity or something, but she believed that she was a Gnostic. I can't remember if she said she was a Christian Gnostic or just a Gnostic. I think she just said Gnostic. And she said, I read all the books of the Bible, and then I read all these Gnostic books. And, you know, she had this idea of after death that there could be these dark spirits. So there were dark spirits out there, and you didn't want to be a dark spirit when you died. And I can't remember now. I can't remember if I wrote about it or not, but I remember when I was reading it, like it was so complicated. And God sort of has a female half, but the female half is also independent.
Yeah.
It was a very strange theology. It was very weird, but
One
apparently
of, one,
your
one of the
theology.
guys that was actually really good at exposing this, do you remember the Amazing Randy?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was an atheist, well-known atheist, but there's clips on YouTube because I remember I was doing a talk on this, and oftentimes he would hold these challenges to see if the psychic could, or whatever the New Age person was, whether they were going to move something with their mind or something in a very controlled situation, and they couldn't. But Sylvia Brown was one who got numerous wrong. I mean, numerous ones
Did
wrong.
she actually submit to some of his challenges?
Not with James Randi, but I'll send you the video on YouTube where,
Okay.
yeah, it's pretty horrific. Some of the missteps that she makes.
Yeah. Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, I mean,
They're not always right. I mean, I took psychic development courses. I took more than one, and I
okay,
was learning astrology. And I had a psychic teacher who said, the teacher of one of my psychic development classes said, the best psychic on his or her best day is at most 85% right.
wow,
And he said that's the best psychic on their best day. So if you're just an average psychic or kind of pretty good psychic on having a kind of good day, then you're going to be way less than that.
right,
I don't
yeah,
remember if he explained why, but I remember him saying that because it really struck me. I've never forgotten it.
yeah,
And so they don't really claim to be 100% correct. Now, they'll give different reasons, Like
yeah,
mediums who claim to contact the dead will give reasons such as, well, when you tune in to that level, or you tune into that dimension where you're getting these messages from the dead, there's a lot of noise that interferes, or you actually have to raise your vibration. I think John Edwards said this. John Edwards, another famous medium who started off on the Sci-Fi Channel, and he
wow,
became so popular that they put him in almost every TV market in the country.
huh,
And he was young and kind of hip looking, and a lot of young teenagers really got interested in watching him and thought he was cool, because I was talking to youth groups at the time, and I was always
right,
asked about John Edward. I was always asked about him. Um, and so I think he's the one who said there's this vibration and you have to be attuned to that. And he said, and he would say things like, sometimes, the dead person or whoever you're communicating with is showing me symbols, but I have to try to interpret what they are. I don't always understand them. Like they might show me this coffee cup, and I don't really know what are they saying. Are they saying that they're the person they're communicating with is a coffee drinker or died from drinking too much coffee, or what? So he would explain how it involved this level of having to tune into this vibration level and interpret symbols that he saw.
wow,
So, they give their reasons why. Now, my own view of this as far as mediums go is, of course, all mediums have spirit guides. And in fact, Sylvia Brown talked about her spirit guide a lot. Her spirit guide was, she called her Francine. And she even had a story about it. She said when she was 8 years old, she was in bed, and this figure appeared in her room, a woman who I think she described as sort of shining. I can't remember for sure now. She was scared. She jumped out of bed and ran downstairs. For whatever reason, she was with her grandmother or living with her grandmother. And she went into the kitchen where her grandmother was and said, "This woman just appeared in my room. You know, I'm really scared, you know, Grandma." And the grandmother said, "Oh, that's your guide." So her grandmother supposedly was into all this and had guides too. And she said, "Just go back and talk to her." So Sylvia went back to her room and supposedly had this conversation with this guide who gave her name to Sylvia. And I can't remember if Sylvia actually gives the name or she just says it was a complicated name. So I decided just to call her Francine. And I know in one place in one of her books, she says that about 95% of all her information about the other side, which the other side means the world of the dead, where the dead are, comes from Francine. Yeah. I mean, so I don't think a lot of people think she was just a charlatan and she was pretending to get. I don't. I think she was actually a real medium. And yes, she was wrong because mediums aren't always right. God doesn't allow them to be right all the time.
Right.
And sometimes she may have been, you know, giving good guesses. I think it's a mixture. I think it's a mixed bag. But I do think she actually did have a spirit guide. And because I've read her books, I don't think she was faking any of that. That would be too hard to write about and fake in a book, in my opinion. As somebody who knew mediums. Okay, I had friends who were mediums. And people would hire them to come to their house if they thought there was a spirit haunting the house or something. They actually had jobs where they would go supposedly get rid of these spirits. And my first psychic development class, the teacher was a medium. That's exactly what she was. She was a medium / psychic. And we did we did seances.
So in a Christian worldview, then what would we say a spirit guide is for those maybe watching? Maybe they're surprised that you just said, "Yeah, I think she really had one." So in a Christian worldview, how do we explain a spirit guide?
Yeah, spirit guide would be a fallen angel who is appearing as something else, you know, something good.
Which we call demons, right?
Yeah, demons. Also, I've gotten so used to using the term fallen angel. But you're right.
Well,
it is a demon.
Maybe those who are not familiar.
When I talk to people in the New Age of the occult, it's easier to use the word fallen angel.
Yeah, I got
than demon, because demon is almost a cartoonish figure to them. You know, it's like something you see in a cartoon, some silly cartoon with the demon with a, you know, pitchfork or something, or, you know, there's a lot of humorous things that use the figure of what we think of as a demon. So, and it's really technically they are fallen angels. So I like to use that term because so many people, especially in the New Age, are into angels and angel contact. And so, you know, the angels are always good to them usually. And so I talk about, no, there's angels who are not good. There's angels who serve God, and there's angels who rebelled against God and serve Satan. So, you know, that's usually what I try to say if I can have a conversation with somebody, especially in the New Age. So, so that's what spirit guides are. And everybody who does, who practices either in the New Age or in the occult, or does an occult practice or a New Age practice seriously, will have spirit guides. It's inevitable. Even if you don't try to have them, you're going to have them. And I was introduced to my main spirit guide through a guided meditation. And this is another danger, is guided meditations are very dangerous. And now we have apps. There are all these apps like Headspace and Calm. And there's even a Christian one called Abide that has guided meditations. So I even did a Facebook post on the app called Abide, because it's very New Agey and it's supposedly Christian. It uses scripture. I was really appalled. Devin, I was appalled by what I heard. They have a lot of their guided meditations online. So, you know, I didn't get the app. I just went online and listened to them, and I wrote about it. A guided meditation is when another person, you can either be there with the person, or you can be listening to their voice online or on your phone, and they are telling you what to visualize in your mind. First, they get you to relax, so you breathe usually very slowly a certain way, and they may have you visualize something while you're breathing, And that actually puts you in a hypnotic state, a light trance state. And then
Wow.
your mind is open and receptive for anything that wants to come in. And you'll believe almost anything. And then they start with the meditation. Okay, now, you know, you see yourself on this path, you're going down this path, there's a river on one side and trees on another, and now you come to some steps and you go down this, you know, and they'll just, whatever they're doing or the purpose of it, they'll have you visualize these things in your mind. So I was in this group called, it was called Inner Light, Inner Light Consciousness. And I was very excited to get in it. I had been going to Quaker meetings. Now this is where I was beginning to really seriously get in the New Age. And the Quakers teach about the inner light. So everybody has the inner light in Quakerism.
Wow.
And so when I saw Inner Light, they were hosting this. So I saw Inner Light Consciousness. I thought, wow, you know, that's what I want to learn about. And basically what it was is they would teach us these basically occult and New Age practices. So every evening, you know, we would have a lecture, and then they would talk about something. We did chanting. I remember the first time we did this chanting where we sat around in a circle and we chanted Elohim over and over again.
Wow.
And we were told Elohim meant divine beings, which it does. It does have, Elohim has a lot of meanings in case some people don't know. It is a word God uses of himself, but it also can mean divine beings. It's a plural word, although when it's used of God, my understanding is that the verb used is in singular form. That's what I think I've read.
Right.
So it's not talking about, God is not a plurality of gods. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So he said, yeah, we're going to call on divine beings and we're going to chant this over and over again. We learned how to do supposedly remote healing. We talked about dreams and interpreting dreams, which is a very New Age thing.
Right.
You know, and then they had this meditation we did every time in class, and he would guide us through it, and we would go through it. And I realized later we would go through, it was a series of 7 scenes, and each scene was a different color. So it started off with red, and then it went to orange, and then it went to yellow, and then it went to green, and then it went to blue. I found out later those are the colors of the chakras. And
wow.
so he was starting with the lowest chakra and moving up to the highest chakra. And the last night we did the meditation, he said, tonight's meditation at the end is going to be different. We're going to have you meet your spiritual master.
Wow.
And so he said, as you do the meditation, be aware that I'm not going to end it where I usually do. I'm going to continue it so that you can meet your spiritual master. And so that's what happened.
So save the rest. It's 2:00. I want to hear this story next week. This will make people have to go into the next.
That's right. Yes, we're going to leave you right there on a cliffhanger.
Yeah, I want to hear about this, and also what happened after you became a Christian and how that whole thing came about. And man, that's amazing.
And talk a little more about psychics and channeling and automatic.
Yes, we're looking forward to that. Marcia, thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, friends, next week, psychics and channeling. Let's see, the question is asked, how do we get the link for next week? It'll be the same link that has been up. So if you just go to this same link that you clicked on to get here, we will have that.
Or can they go to your page, Devin? Is it on your personal page?
Yeah, they can go to my page or your page as long as they just
because as soon as Devin gives it to me, I put it up on I have
it's the same link that we used last week.
Okay.
So yeah, you can just put the same
link.
People,
you know, might lose it like me. I need to be doing it every time.
Yeah.
So,
that's
I have let me just tell this person who kindly listened into us here, and anybody else, I have a Facebook page called Christian Answers for the New Age. And as soon as Devin gives it to me, I will, which is usually like the day before, or the evening before maybe, or at least that morning, I will post it on my my Cana Christian Answers for the New Age page, and my
Yeah.
personal page. If you go to Marcia Montenegro, you'll see it, because most of my posts are public. So
Yeah, and also, just so you know, these talks are all on YouTube. So this will have, Melissa will have this up on our YouTube page at Ratio Christi at Winthrop University on YouTube, and I'll shoot the link to, or the YouTube video to Marcia as soon as we get it up, and then she can get it on her page as well. So.
great.
All right, Marcia, let me go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.
Okay.
And let's see here. Stop. Want to stop cloud recording.